The house sat quietly behind a row of ficus hedges in a modest cul-de-sac in the Hollywood Hills. It was smaller than most of the celebrity homes in the area, a single-story stucco place with Spanish tile roofing, tucked into a slope with a barely visible backyard. Some called it humble, others called it forgettable. But those who lived nearby never forgot what happened there. Verne Troyer had bought the house in the early 2000s, years before his death in 2018. After his passing, the property sat empty for a while, longer than usual for a house in that neighborhood. Some chalked it up to market conditions. Others whispered about bad energy. But no one said anything aloud. In LA, silence is often cheaper than truth. In July of last year, a young couple, Marla and Jordan Baines, bought the house at a surprisingly low price. They had just moved from Minneapolis after Jordan had landed a job with an animation studio in Burbank. Marla, a freelance photographer with a taste for vintage interiors, was in love with the property's history. "It's got a personality," she told the real estate agent, smiling at the low ceiling beams and narrow hallway. "You can feel it, like it wants to be lived in again." They closed the deal in 3 weeks and moved in on the 4th. From day one, strange things began. The first week, it was subtle. At night, when the house should have been still, there were noises not loud enough to panic over, but enough to pause. A light thump in the hallway, a metallic clink in the kitchen. Jordan blamed raccoons. Marla said old plumbing. But the house had been updated just 2 years prior. On the 5th night, Marla was woken at 3:11 a.m. by the sound of whispering. She thought it was the television and stumbled into the living room. Nothing was on. But she noticed the hallway light was off. She always left it on for Jordan when he stayed up late. She flicked the switch. Nothing happened. Only later did she realize the hallway light hadn't been working since the day they moved in. But that night, just before she fell back asleep, it turned on for half a second, then blinked out. That's when she started dreaming about a small man sitting in the corner of their bedroom, legs crossed, watching, never moving, just observing. The hallway closet had been locked since they moved in. The previous owner, some property investor from San Diego, said he'd never had the key. Just a linen closet, probably painted shut or something. But on a Tuesday morning in October, Marla found it wide open. Inside, dusty black hats hung from a bent clothing rod, and a strange smell like old leather and damp concrete wafted out. At the back was a wooden trunk. It took 2 days for Jordan to build up the nerve to open it. Inside were several of Verne Troyer's belongings, a tiny tuxedo jacket, an old-style phone charger, and a spiral notebook with pages torn out. One entry remained, scribbled in the corner of the back cover. "I don't belong here. They keep watching. I sleep in the closet because I feel safer there." Jordan threw the trunk out that same day. The smell remained. It was always just 3 steps. Not 4. Not 2. Always 3. From the hallway to the bathroom. From the kitchen to the back door. From behind the couch to the middle of the living room. The sound was consistent, like someone barefoot walking slowly. And it always happened when one of them was alone. Jordan heard it when Marla was out at a shoot in Pasadena. Marla heard it when Jordan worked late. They stopped telling each other about it because neither one wanted to admit what was happening. One night, while reviewing footage for a short documentary, Marla noticed something strange in the reflection of the bathroom mirror behind her. In the footage, she sat on the couch talking to camera. But in the mirror, something small moved across the hallway. Very small and fast. She paused the video, enlarged the screen. The shape looked human, but distorted, hunched, as if its spine were curved permanently downward. Paused briefly, then seemed to look toward the lens. When she showed Jordan, he stared for a long time. "That's the same height as," he started, then stopped. They stopped filming in the house after that. It began opening at night. Just an inch or 2, sometimes 3. Always around 2:30 a.m., the door would creak open on its own, slow, like it was careful not to wake them. One night, Jordan bolted out of bed and pulled the door shut with enough force to rattle the hinges. When he turned back to the bed, Marla was sitting upright, her eyes wide. "He was in here," she whispered. "Who?" She wouldn't answer. That morning, she insisted they leave. for good. They stayed at a hotel for 2 weeks, then moved to a short-term rental in Sherman Oaks. They never returned, not even to pack. Movers came instead. The house sits on the market again now. No buyers. Only rumors. Some say Verne Troyer never really left. Not entirely. Some say he was scared in that house of something else that lived there, even when he was alive. Something that kept him in the closet at night. Something that made the hallway light flicker and the air smell like damp velvet. Others say it's not him haunting the house at all. That what's there simply uses his image. His size. His stillness. Whatever it is, it waits in the hallway. And takes only 3 steps at a time. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The movers didn't speak much. 3 men in gray hoodies and work boots carried box after box out through the front door of the Hollywood Hills bungalow. Their heads down, breath held. As if the air inside the house offended something deep in the back of their throats. They moved fast, too fast for a 1-story place without stairs. By 11 a.m., they were done, though a few boxes remained in the back bedroom. One of the movers, a man named Lou who'd worked dozens of celebrity homes before, refused to return inside. His partner went back in alone, whistling to himself, the sound echoing hollowly down the hallway. He came out 5 minutes later, pale, silent, not carrying anything. The company never charged Marla and Jordan for those last boxes. They never called to explain why. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the couple had left. Life in the Sherman Oaks rental was clean, empty, and dull. No sounds at night. No smells in the vents. No closet doors found ajar in the morning. But there was a tension between them now like a taut thread that hummed even in silence. They didn't speak about the house anymore, not directly, but pieces of it lived in their conversations. The hesitation in Jordan's voice. The way Marla began turning every mirror around, facing it toward the wall. Then the postcards began arriving. 3 in total, each without a stamp or return address. They came folded in half with no writing inside. Only black and white photographs taped to the inner surface. The first was a photo of the closet, the small one in the hallway that had once been locked. The door was open, just a crack, but you could see something low to the floor, a shadow or a shape that didn't belong to the architecture. The second card showed the living room couch. Marla's old throw blanket still draped over the backrest. In the corner of the image, near the edge of the frame, a pair of bare feet were visible, just the toes and part of the heel mid-step blurry. The third postcard arrived on a Tuesday morning in late November. The house in the photograph was not the bungalow, but the Sherman Oaks rental. The angle of the photo was from the sidewalk outside, looking in through the living room window. They hadn't told anyone where they were living. Marla stopped going outside. She took to sitting on the floor with her knees pulled tight to her chest, drinking coffee until dusk. She barely spoke except in short, clipped answers, always avoiding Jordan's eyes. On the 3rd day after the last postcard, she started scratching at her forearms, just at the edge of her sleeves. Small at first, then deeper. Jordan found her that night in the bathroom, the lights off, just standing in front of the mirror. "Marla," he said softly, "what are you doing?" She tilted her head, her voice dry like paper. "He's in there again." Jordan didn't answer. He looked at her reflection, then at her. Something didn't match. Her reflection was smiling. Jordan tried to rationalize its stress, trauma, isolation, but his mind kept circling the details he couldn't explain. Like the ring of water on the kitchen table in the rental, perfectly round, as if a glass had been set there, yet neither of them had used that table in days. Or the hallway light bulb that burned out every 3 nights, even after replacing it with new ones. Or the low, deliberate creak of wood that came from the bedroom ceiling at exactly 3:11 a.m. That was the same time Marla had first heard the whispers in the old house. He started dreaming again. In one dream, he was back in the bungalow. Only the walls were wrong, they pulsed slightly, as if made of muscle beneath the paint. In the hallway, a small figure stood facing the closet door, its head bowed, its hands balled into fists at its sides. When Jordan stepped closer, the figure turned around and opened its mouth, but there were no teeth, just a black, echoing hole, and the sound of something scraping slowly across wood. He woke up to find his pillow turned sideways, like someone had sat beside him while he slept. One day in December, Marla disappeared. The front door was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. No messages. Her purse remained, but her shoes were gone. All of them. Every pair. Police found nothing. Jordan filed reports, hung flyers, checked hospitals and morgues, but no one ever saw her again. All he had was the last text she'd sent him that morning. He never left the house. The house followed us. Jordan sat alone now, night after night, in the rental's kitchen, smoking old cigarettes he hadn't touched in years, watching the hallway. He kept the bedroom light on. Always. And yet, every few nights it clicked off at exactly the same time. 3:11 a.m. And each time it did, he could hear it. 3 steps. Just 3. Soft. Slow. Coming closer. The light in the hallway burned out again. Jordan stood in the kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile, cigarette trembling slightly in his hand. It was 3:12 a.m. He had checked the clock 5 times. He hadn't gone to bed. Couldn't. For 3 nights straight, the moment he turned out the lights in the kitchen, something whispered just outside the range of hearing, like someone pressing their mouth to the wall and mouthing words too slowly to make sound. And then the steps. Always 3. He walked to the edge of the hallway, heart knocking in his chest like a child begging to be let out of a locked closet. The hallway light above him had popped an hour ago, the last flicker cutting a jagged shadow across the ceiling like a fracture in plaster. He hadn't replaced it. He didn't want to reach up into that darkness anymore. From the far end of the hallway, the closed bedroom door stood too still. It was like staring at a stage where something was about to emerge from behind the curtain. The air was heavy, not just warm, dense, pressurized, the kind of atmosphere you'd expect before a lightning storm, but inside the house, like something was leaning into the walls from behind, stretching them ever so slightly, waiting for the moment to puncture through. Jordan took a step forward. The floor creaked under his heel. He held his breath, listening. From within the bedroom just barely came the sound of something scraping across the inside of the wall. He knew that sound. It had started faint, days ago. At first he'd thought it was rats. He even called an exterminator who searched the attic and crawl space with a flashlight and a clipboard and left in a hurry, mumbling something about foundation settling and never sending the report. But the sound wasn't like chewing. It was more deliberate, like someone was dragging a fingernail across drywall, searching for weak points. That morning, Jordan found one of Marla's shoes on the front porch. Just one, the red suede heel she wore for special occasions. It was set perfectly upright, right in the center of the doormat. It hadn't been there the night before. He checked the security cam he'd installed facing the porch. The motion alert was triggered at 3:09 a.m., but when he opened the file, the feed was solid black. Audio, though, still worked. 3 soft footsteps. A whisper. Then something else. A voice faint and breathless, almost like a child mimicking someone else, spoke directly into the microphone. "Come back. You left me in the wall." He stopped leaving the house altogether. Days passed without sunlight. The windows were shut tight, the curtains pinned closed with thumbtacks, blankets layered over them like insulation. The house grew darker, the air staler. Every noise stood out like a gunshot, a dropped spoon, a creak from the ceiling, the soft pitter-patter of footsteps down the hall, even when Jordan was still and silent in the kitchen. He slept in the pantry now, the small, doorless space between the refrigerator and the back wall of the kitchen. He dragged in an old couch cushion and 2 pillows, and at night he wrapped himself in a blanket and stared into the darkened hallway, daring it to move. It always did. Sometimes the movement was quick, a blur across the floor, a tug at the corner of the hallway rug, a soft slap like a bare foot landing just a little too heavy. Other times it was slower, like something crawling beneath the surface of the floor, pressing upward. The wood beneath his feet would bend slightly, as if following the weight of something tiny and restless. He began to notice new details in the house. Corners that didn't align like they used to, a faint tilt to the bedroom doorframe that hadn't been there before. Once, while brushing his teeth at the kitchen sink, He noticed the hallway had seemed shorter, like it had lost 4 or 5 inches in length, its walls just slightly closer together than he remembered. Something was changing, growing, turning in on itself. He opened the attic one night not because he wanted to, but because he felt he had to. The feeling had started like an itch behind his eyes, a compulsion to climb, to see. He pulled the string. The ladder came down slow. The attic was empty except for dust, old insulation, and a series of dark stains on the plywood flooring. Stains shaped like knees, like the kind someone would leave if they crouched in the same spot night after night. In the far corner was a small, rectangular hole in the wall. He didn't crawl in. He didn't need to, because as he stared at it, the hole breathed. Shallow, weak, but alive. It had been almost a month since Marla vanished. One night, he played back the old footage she'd shot, raw files still on her SD card. Most were of her talking into the camera, describing colors, textures, the house's mood. But at the end of one file, just before she turned the camera off, the lens caught something behind her. Reflected in the kitchen window. A figure, small, pale, standing behind the curtain in the hallway. It wasn't just Verne Troyer. Jordan could feel that. This thing, it wore Verne like a costume, like a face it had borrowed. Too still, too patient. Something that had learned how to mimic a shape and stay hidden just long enough to be noticed, only when it wanted to be. He paused the frame, zoomed in. The face was wrong. The eyes too large, the mouth too flat. The edges of the body smudged slightly, as if it were flickering in and out of something else. A deeper shadow, a darker version of the house, layered underneath this one. Now the walls whisper when he breathes. They repeat the sounds of his own voice but slightly altered, like a parrot misremembering a word. They call to him by name. They tell him he was never supposed to leave the bungalow, that by leaving, he brought it with him. That it lives in drywall. That it eats sound and drinks light and waits in small corners of small rooms. That the closet wasn't haunted. It was a prison, and he opened it. It was the smell that finally broke him. A damp, rotting sweetness. Faint at first, then growing stronger with each day. Like fruit forgotten in a locked car under the sun. It clung to the air, seeped into the drywall, soaked into his skin and hair and breath. No matter how long Jordan stood in the shower, steaming water turned almost scalding, he couldn't wash it away. Came from the walls. He'd press his ear to them sometimes, not even thinking anymore, just listening. The sound inside was soft and layered. Breathing, scratching, and a new sound now, a slow, wet dragging. Like something pulling itself forward across tile. Something that didn't belong to the house, but was becoming part of it. The thing was hungry. He could feel it. Not for food, for presence, for attention, for the weight of a gaze. It lived off observation. The more he watched it, the more real it became. And he watched it constantly. The crawlspace hatch had always been locked. He hadn't bothered with it when they moved in. Who needed to go under the house? But now, weeks into this fevered isolation, it called to him like a wound that needed scratching. He broke the lock open with a tire iron. The hatch door fell open with a hollow metallic groan, revealing a square of darkness beneath the hallway. Stale air hissed upward. Something deep in that dark exhaled a warm, wet breath that fogged his glasses. He got down on all fours, flashlight gripped between his teeth, heart thudding. The air was tight. The underside of the house pressed close, beams only a foot above the dirt, piping coiled like veins. He had to crawl on his belly, dragging himself forward with one hand while the other gripped the flashlight. Dust and grit scraped into his shirt, into his mouth. Every movement made the entire house above him creak slightly, like it disapproved. He reached the far corner, where the smell was strongest. And then he saw it. It wasn't a body. Not exactly. It was a shape curled in on itself like a spider playing dead. Arms pulled tight to its sides. Legs twisted at unnatural angles. Its skin was white and waxy, stretched thin like old latex, with veins that pulsed too slowly to be alive. Its face was Verne Troyer. And not. The proportions were off, larger eyes, too wide apart. A mouth that didn't move, but breathed, or pretended to. The torso twitched slightly when Jordan's flashlight touched it, like it had been startled, or like it noticed him. He should have crawled backward, but he didn't. He leaned closer, flashlight trembling, breath shallow. The eyes opened, not suddenly, not like in the movies. They slid apart, slowly, as if the lids were made of something thick and tired. Underneath, wet black marbles, rolling toward him, looking through him. Then the thing spoke, not aloud but inside his ears, like pressure from within. She's here with me. She chose to stay. You will too. Jordan tried to scream, but his lungs were frozen. His arms wouldn't move. He felt something cold and damp curl around his ankle, not a hand, not a rope, just wet. He kicked violently. Dirt sprayed up into his mouth. His flashlight clattered, spun wildly, and landed beam first into the corner behind the thing. That's when he saw the others. For maybe 5 shapes. All small. All folded. All sharing the same face. Verne. Smiling, weeping, crawling. They twitched when the light hit them, as if it pained them. The beam dimmed. Batteries dying. And in the flickering he heard them start to sing. A low, off-tune hum. Like children humming through the walls of an old school. Words he didn't understand, but somehow knew. Open the door. Let it in. Be small. Stay still. Jordan burst out of the crawl space, coughing black spit, collapsing onto the floor of the hallway. He slammed the hatch shut, dragged a dresser over it, and sat against the wall for hours, shivering. He called the realtor the next morning. Told them he was selling the house. Sight unseen. No negotiation. He didn't pack. He left everything. The house sat empty for months. A for sale sign sank slowly into the overgrown yard. Real estate agents refused to hold open houses. One who did lasted 30 minutes before locking the doors and vomiting into the hedge. She said the smell was like birth and rot at the same time. Neighbors noticed the house getting smaller. Not metaphorically, literally. Over time, the windows seemed closer together. The porch warped inward. The walls shrank. No one could explain it. City inspectors came once, took measurements, then left without speaking. The report was never filed. Eventually, no one noticed the house anymore. They stopped seeing it, like it was folding into itself, like it was digesting. Jordan moved to Chicago. 3rd-floor apartment. Brick building. Windows facing east. No hallway. No crawl space. He started therapy. Medication. Long walks. It was almost working. Until one night, while brushing his teeth, he noticed the bathroom mirror was a fraction lower than it had been the day before. Not the frame, the glass itself. And in the reflection just over his shoulder, something small and pale leaned against the wall behind him. Smiling. Waiting. Because he didn't leave the house. The house left with him. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.